Open this door right now or I'm breaking it down.
Officer, it's after midnight. I'm not opening my door without seeing a warrant. Who are you looking for?
I don't need a warrant. Open the door now or you're going to jail.
Sir, I'm a physician. I just got home from a 16-hour shift.
You need to identify yourself and state your business.
The doorbell camera captured everything in crystal clear high definition. The timestamp read 12:07 a.m. And Officer Trevor Marks had absolutely no idea that the exhausted doctor he was threatening to arrest on our own doorstep had spent the last 14 hours saving lives in the emergency room, including the life of a police officer shot in the line of duty just 6 hours earlier. The woman standing behind her locked front door wasn't panicking. She wasn't crying. She wasn't complying with illegal demands. She was Dr. Sarah Chun, a board-certified emergency medicine physician, and she knew her constitutional rights better than most lawyers. Officer Marks had the wrong house, the wrong person, and the wrong approach. And in the next 72 hours, his threats, his lies, and his complete disregard for the law would cost him everything: his badge, his freedom, and his future. Because what Trevor Marks didn't know was that Dr. Chen's doorbell footage would become Exhibit A in a federal criminal case that would send him to prison and trigger a corruption investigation that would expose an entire network of officers who've been terrorizing innocent people for years. Before we dive deeper into this absolutely shocking story, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from, your country, your state, wherever you are. And if you believe in holding authority figures accountable when they abuse their power, hit that subscribe button. Dr. Sarah Chun was exhausted when she pulled into her driveway at 11:52 p.m. She was 38 years old, a highly respected emergency physician at Seattle General Hospital, and she had just completed one of the most grueling shifts of her career: 14 straight hours, 3 cardiac arrests, 2 gunshot victims, 1 successful resuscitation of a police officer who'd been shot during a domestic violence call. She had literally saved a cop's life that afternoon, performing emergency surgery in the trauma bay that kept him alive long enough to get to the OR. Now she just wanted to get inside, take a shower, and collapse into bed. Her house was in a quiet residential neighborhood where she'd lived for 5 years. Her neighbors knew her. The local coffee shop knew her. She was part of this community. Sarah grabbed her medical bag from the passenger seat and walked to her front door. She was so tired she could barely think straight. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and was about to close it when she heard a car door slam. She looked back. A police cruiser had pulled up to the curb in front of her house. An officer was getting out, moving quickly toward her door. Officer Trevor Marks was 33 years old, with 9 years on the Seattle Police Department. He was responding to a domestic disturbance call, but he had the wrong address. The call was for 2847 Maple Street. Sarah's house was 2874 Maple Street. A simple transposition error that Marks should have caught, but didn't. Marks reached Sarah's door and pounded on it with his fist. "Open up. Police." Sarah had just locked the door behind her. She opened it slightly, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Officer, can I help you? What's this about?" "I need you to step outside right now," Marks demanded. "For what reason?" "I just got home. I'm a physician at Seattle General. I've been working for 14 hours. We received a domestic disturbance call. I need you to step outside." "Officer, I live alone. There's no domestic disturbance here. You must have the wrong house." Marks didn't like being questioned. Most people he encountered just complied immediately. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again. Step outside now." Sarah's medical training had taught her to stay calm under pressure. "Officer, I need to see your badge number, and I need you to verify the address you're looking for. This is my home. There's no disturbance here." Sarah closed the door and locked it. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She was going to report an officer at her door who wouldn't identify himself properly or verify his address. But before she could finish dialing, Mark started pounding on the door again, harder this time. "Open this door right now, or I'm breaking it down." Sarah kept her phone ready and spoke through the closed door. "Officer, I'm calling 911 to verify this call. I need you to provide your badge number and the address you're responding to." "I don't need to provide anything. You're obstructing a police investigation." "There is no investigation." I live alone. I just got home. There's no disturbance here. You clearly have the wrong house. Marks was furious now. His ego couldn't handle someone refusing his commands. You got 5 seconds to open this door, or I'm kicking it in. 1. Sarah's doorbell camera was recording everything. Every threat. Every illegal demand. Every violation of her Fourth Amendment rights. 2. Sarah spoke calmly but firmly. Officer, my doorbell camera is recording this entire encounter. You are threatening to illegally enter my home without a warrant, without probable cause, and without even verifying you have the correct address. Marks took a step back as if preparing to kick the door. Sarah made a split-second decision. She called 911. The dispatcher answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? This is Dr. Sarah Chun at 2874 Maple Street. There's a police officer at my door threatening to break it down. He won't verify his badge number or confirm he has the right address. I need a supervisor here immediately. Ma'am, you said there's a police officer at your door? Yes. He's threatening to kick my door in. He says he's responding to a domestic disturbance. But I live alone. I just got home from the hospital. I think he has the wrong house. The dispatcher put Sarah on hold briefly. When she came back, her tone had changed. Dr. Chun, I'm showing the domestic disturbance call was for 2847 Maple Street, not 2874. The officer is at the wrong house. I'm dispatching a supervisor to your location now. Can you safely stay inside? Yes, my door is locked, but the officer is still threatening to break it down. Tell him a supervisor is en route, and he needs to step back and verify the address. The dispatcher tried to reach Marks on the radio. He ignored it. Sarah heard the radio traffic from outside her door. She could hear dispatch calling Marks's unit number. She could hear him ignoring it. Officer, your dispatch is calling you. A supervisor is en route. You need to verify the address. Marks realized he was in trouble. He'd threatened to break down a door. He'd ignored his radio. He'd refused to verify the address. And now a supervisor was coming. Instead of de-escalating, Marks made everything worse. He tried the door handle. When it didn't open, he actually kicked the door once. Not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to show his intent. Sarah recorded everything on her phone camera from inside. She was narrating what was happening. It's 12:11 a.m. Officer Marks just kicked my door. I'm a physician. I live alone. I just got home from work. He has the wrong house. Dispatch confirmed the call was for a different address. He's still trying to get in. A sergeant's vehicle pulled up 3 minutes later. Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez had 20 years on the force and had seen plenty of bad stops. But this was something else entirely. Sergeant Rodriguez approached the door. Dr. Chun, this is Sergeant Rodriguez. Can you please come to the door? Sarah opened the door slightly, chain still engaged. Sergeant, I'm Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm an emergency physician at Seattle General. I got home about 20 minutes ago from a 14-hour shift. This officer started pounding on my door, refused to verify his badge number, threatened to break down my door, and actually kicked it. I called 911. Dispatch confirmed he has the wrong address. Rodriguez looked at Marks. Is that accurate? Marks shook his head. No, Sergeant. When I arrived, I could hear screaming from inside the house. The subject was acting erratically and refused to cooperate. Sarah felt her anger rising. That's a complete lie, and my doorbell camera recorded the entire encounter from the moment he arrived. There was no screaming. I was completely calm. Rodriguez's expression changed. She looked at the doorbell camera, then at Marks. She pulled out her phone. Dr. Chun, do you consent to show me your doorbell footage? Absolutely, Sarah said. I want you to see everything he did. Sarah pulled up the footage on her phone app and held it up to the door opening. Rodriguez watched the entire interaction. Rodriguez's face went from professional to furious in about 30 seconds of watching the footage. Officer Marks, step back to your vehicle right now. But Sergeant, that was not a request. Get back to your vehicle now. Marks walked back to his patrol car, knowing his career was in jeopardy. Rodriguez turned back to Sarah. Dr. Chun, I apologize for this incident. The call was indeed for 2847 Maple Street, not your address. Officer Marks was at the wrong location. He should have verified before making contact. He definitely should not have made threats or kicked your door. I need to file an incident report. Would you be willing to provide a statement? Yes, Sarah said, and I want to file a formal complaint. I also want copies of all body camera footage, dispatch recordings, and my doorbell footage entered into the record. Rodriguez nodded. You'll have everything. I'm also going to recommend that Internal Affairs investigate this immediately. This is not acceptable behavior. Sarah finally opened the door fully. She showed Rodriguez the small dent in the door where Marks had kicked it, physical evidence of his assault on her property. Rodriguez took photos with her phone and documented everything. Rodriguez's radio crackled. All units, we have multiple calls now for 2847 Maple Street. Neighbors reporting escalating domestic disturbance, possible violence. Rodriguez looked at Marks with disgust. While you were here harassing Dr. Chin at the wrong address, the actual emergency was getting worse 3 blocks away. Get to that location now. Marks drove off. Rodriguez stayed with Sarah for another 10 minutes, making sure she had all the information she needed to file her complaint. When Sarah finally got inside and closed her door, it was almost 1 a.m. She sat on her couch for a long moment, processing what had just happened. She had saved a police officer's life that afternoon, and now a different officer had threatened her, lied about her, and assaulted her property. The next morning, Sarah went to the police station to file her formal complaint. She brought her doorbell footage on a USB drive. She also brought something else that would prove crucial. Sarah had a photographic memory and meticulous attention to detail, skills honed by years of emergency medicine. She had written down everything. Times, exact quotes, observations, everything Marks had said and done. The Internal Affairs investigator assigned to Sarah's case was Detective James Walsh, a 25-year veteran known for his thoroughness. When Sarah mentioned there were other complaints, Walsh's expression changed. Dr. Chun, I need to be very careful about what I can tell you regarding other investigations. But I can say that your complaint is being taken very seriously, and your evidence is extremely valuable. Walsh reviewed Sarah's doorbell footage frame by frame. He watched Mark threaten her, ignore his radio, lie about hearing screaming, and kick her door. Then Walsh pulled up the body camera footage from Marks. What he found was stunning. Marks had turned off his body camera before approaching Sarah's door. Department policy required cameras to be on during all citizen contacts. Turning it off was a terminable offense by itself. But it got worse. Walsh pulled radio logs and dispatch records. He found that Marks had been at the wrong address on 17 occasions in the past year. 17 times. That wasn't incompetence. That was a pattern. Walsh dug deeper into Marks' history. What he found made him physically ill. Walsh brought his findings to his supervisor, who immediately escalated to the chief of police. This wasn't just misconduct. This was predatory behavior. Marks was using his badge as a weapon to terrorize vulnerable people. The chief ordered a comprehensive investigation. Every call Marks had responded to in the past 2 years. Every complaint. Every incident report. Investigators found a disturbing pattern. Marks would take domestic disturbance calls, deliberately transpose address numbers, and show up at houses where young professional women lived alone. He'd use the call as an excuse to demand entry, make threats, and create fear. When people complained, he claimed they were uncooperative or erratic. Most people didn't pursue complaints because they didn't want trouble with the police. But Sarah was different. She had evidence. She had documentation. She had a doorbell camera that captured everything. And she wasn't backing down. The district attorney's office was brought in to review the case for criminal charges. What started as a simple complaint about an officer at the wrong address was becoming a criminal investigation into abuse of authority and possibly stalking. The database searches were the smoking gun. Marks had violated federal law by accessing confidential law enforcement databases for personal reasons. Each unauthorized search was a felony. Investigators found 47 unauthorized searches over 18 months. All for women. All single. All are living alone in nice neighborhoods. The FBI was notified because unauthorized access to law enforcement databases is a federal crime. They opened their own investigation parallel to the local one. Marks was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. His badge and gun were taken. He was barred from police property. But he still didn't think he'd face serious consequences. He'd seen officers get away with misconduct before. Meanwhile, Sarah had returned to her work at the hospital. She didn't want to be defined by this incident, but she was determined to see it through to accountability. 3 weeks after the incident, federal prosecutors filed criminal charges for counts of unauthorized access to law enforcement databases, 2 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, 1 count of making false statements to investigators. Because Marks had lied during his interview, the media picked up the story. Local news first, then national outlets. A cop charged with using a badge to stalk women became a headline that spread across the country. Sarah's doorbell footage was released as part of the court filings. It was public record now. Within 48 hours, the video had been viewed over 10 million times. The public reaction was intense. The Seattle Police Department held a press conference. The chief apologized personally to Sarah and the other victims. He announced comprehensive reforms, mandatory body camera usage with severe penalties for turning them off, enhanced oversight of database access, better tracking of officers who repeatedly go to wrong addresses. The press conference didn't satisfy everyone. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters demanding systemic change, not just one officer's prosecution. Sarah was asked to speak to the media. She gave one interview to a respected local journalist. "I don't want to be the face of this story," Sarah said, "but I felt obligated to speak out. If this could happen to me, a physician with resources and education, what happens to people who don't have those advantages? How many women has Officer Marks terrorized who were too afraid to come forward?" The officer Sarah had saved was named Derek Mills. He'd been shot during a domestic violence call, and Sarah had performed life-saving procedures in the trauma bay. When Mills saw the news about Marks, he was horrified. He sent Sarah a private message to the hospital, thanking her for saving his life and expressing disgust at what Marks had done. "That's not what we're supposed to be," Mills wrote. "You saved my life." A few hours later, another cop threatened you at your own home. "That's unacceptable. I'll testify to whatever you need." Sarah appreciated the gesture, but she knew the case would be decided by evidence, not testimony about her character. The evidence was overwhelming. Meanwhile, Mark's attorney was trying to negotiate a plea deal. The federal charges carried significant prison time. His lawyer knew they couldn't win at trial. The doorbell footage was too damning. The database searches were documented. The false statements were recorded. The prosecutor's initial offer was harsh. Plead guilty to all charges. Cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation into other officers. Serve 4 years in federal prison. And never work in law enforcement again. Marks refused. He still thought he could fight this. The conspiracy charges changed everything. Marks hadn't just abused his authority for his own purposes. He'd shared confidential information with a civilian, who then used it to terrorize his ex-girlfriend. The civilian, Jason Brenner, was arrested on stalking charges. He immediately cooperated with prosecutors, providing text messages and emails showing Marks had given him addresses, work schedules, and personal information from police databases. This wasn't just one bad cop anymore. This was a criminal enterprise. Federal prosecutors added 3 more counts to Marks's indictment. The case was no longer negotiable. Marks was going to trial. The trial began 6 months after the incident at Sarah's door. Sarah testified on the first day. She was calm, precise, and devastating. She walked the jury through the doorbell footage, explaining how Marks had threatened her, lied about her behavior, and kicked her door. Defense attorneys tried to suggest Sarah had been uncooperative. The doorbell footage made that argument look ridiculous. She'd been nothing but calm and reasonable. Over the next 2 weeks, prosecutors presented their case: the database searches, the pattern of wrong addresses, the testimony of other women Marks had harassed, the text messages with Brenner, the false statements to investigators. Wade's testimony was devastating. She described multiple incidents where Mark had deliberately gone to the wrong addresses in nice neighborhoods. She thought it was incompetence at first, but eventually realized it was intentional. "Why didn't you report it?" The prosecutor asked. "I did," Wade said quietly. "3 times. To my sergeant. Nothing happened." The courtroom went silent. Wade was essentially testifying that supervisors had ignored her complaints about Marks's pattern of behavior. The defense tried to discredit Wade, suggesting she had a grudge against Marks. But her incident reports were in evidence. She documented everything. She tried to stop this. The system had failed. After Wade's testimony, the prosecution rested. The defense called character witnesses who testified that Marks was a good officer and a good person, but they couldn't overcome the evidence. The doorbell footage played over and over. Marks threatening an exhausted doctor at midnight, lying about hearing screaming, kicking her door, all on video, all undeniable. Closing arguments lasted a full day. The prosecutor was methodical, walking through each charge with supporting evidence. The defense argued Marks had made mistakes but hadn't acted with criminal intent. The judge explained to the jury that they could only decide on the charges presented, but their questions sent a clear message. They believed Marks had lied under oath. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury returned, guilty on all counts: unauthorized access to databases, deprivation of rights under color of law, making false statements, conspiracy, every single charge. Marks showed no emotion as the verdict was read. His family members in the courtroom were crying. Sarah sat in the gallery, feeling no satisfaction, only relief that accountability had finally come. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later. Federal sentencing guidelines recommended 63 to 78 months in prison. The prosecutor asked for the high end. Marks's attorney pleaded for leniency, citing his years of service. But the judge had read every victim statement. Sarah was just one of many. Dr. Chin saved lives for a living. The judge said at sentencing, she saved a police officer's life on the very day Officer Marks threatened her. Instead of gratitude for her service, she received threats and intimidation. The sentence of 72 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Marks's imprisonment sent shockwaves through the Seattle Police Department, but the investigation didn't end with his conviction. The FBI's review of the department's practices uncovered systemic problems. The supervisors who'd ignored Officer Wade's complaints about Marks were placed under investigation. The database access system that had allowed Marks to conduct unauthorized searches was completely overhauled. The Department of Justice opened a pattern and practice investigation into the entire Seattle Police Department. They want to know how Marks had operated for so long without being stopped. The findings were damning. Complaints against officers were routinely downgraded or dismissed. Supervisors protected problem officers. The early warning system, designed to flag problematic behavior, was ignored. The Seattle Police Department entered into a consent decree with the DOJ, requiring federal oversight for 5 years. Mandatory reforms included better complaint tracking, civilian oversight with real authority, enhanced database security, and monthly audits of officer behavior patterns. Sarah watched these changes unfold from a distance. She returned to her work at the hospital, saving lives and training new doctors. Sarah's presentation at the police academy was powerful. She showed the doorbell footage. She explained what Mark had done wrong at every step. She talked about how one officer had saved a life she'd saved, while another had threatened her. She emphasized that good policing required accountability, humility, and respect for constitutional rights. The cadets listened in complete silence. Some took notes. Many looked uncomfortable, which Sarah considered a good sign. They should be uncomfortable. This is what happens when officers abuse their authority. Sarah told them. Officer Marks is in federal prison. His victims are traumatized. The department's reputation is damaged, and public trust is eroded, all because one officer decided his ego mattered more than the law. After her presentation, the academy made it a required part of training. Every new officer would see what Sarah had experienced and learn what not to do. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuits were being settled. Sarah was straightforward. The city offered $500,000. Sarah donated every penny to organizations working on police reform and domestic violence prevention. 3 years after that midnight encounter, Sarah was still working at Seattle General, still saving lives. Officer Marks was still in federal prison, serving his sentence. The Seattle Police Department had implemented meaningful reforms under federal oversight. Complaints were being taken seriously. Problem officers were being identified and addressed. Database access was strictly monitored. The consent decree was working. Officer Derek Mills, whose life Sarah had saved, had become a vocal advocate for police reform within the department. He spoke openly about how Sarah had saved him and how the department needed to honor that by being better. Officer Christine Wade, who testified against Marks, had been promoted to sergeant and was training officers on ethical policing. The 6 women who come forward about Marks had formed a support group and were advocating for better protections for victims of police misconduct. And Sarah's doorbell camera footage was being used in police academies across the country as a teaching tool. One officer's threats, one doctor's courage, one doorbell camera, and a complete transformation of how an entire city approached police accountability. Sarah still had the same doorbell camera. She'd never had to use it to document police misconduct again, but it was there, recording just in case. Because accountability requires vigilance, justice requires evidence, and change requires people willing to stand up and say, "This is not acceptable. Not tonight. Not ever." Thanks for watching the story all the way through. If this opened your eyes to the importance of accountability and the power of evidence in fighting injustice, share it with someone who needs to see it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. We're committed to bringing you stories that expose abuse of power and show that change is possible when people refuse to stay silent. Drop a comment and let us know what was the most powerful moment in this story for you. Do you think doorbell cameras should be standard for accountability? Have you ever had an encounter with law enforcement that felt wrong? Your voice matters in this conversation. See you at the next one.